even things like just having client management system. We use Trello to track most of our projects, and just automating some of those processes.
Yeah.
Just to really set the mark and sort of meet those expectations that a lot of clients do have. And then for me, it's all about just it being professional, it being consistent. I think that's a really important thing, is to be consistent and to meet expectations.
Welcome to the Design Dialogues, the podcast where we dive deep into the business of interior design. I'm Beth Beesky, the founder of More Time to Design and a designer with over 13 years of experience. I'm here to help you navigate the challenges of running a successful studio, whether you're a solo designer or leading a team. Each week, I chat with industry experts and share practical insights to help you streamline your processes, grow your business, and create a studio that thrives. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy our Design Dialogues. Hi everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Design Dialogues podcast. This week I am joined by Marcus Syvertsen from Little Road Interior Design. Hi Marcus.
Hey Beth, how you going? Thanks for having me.
Good. Thank you so much for joining me. So as always, I like to start by asking, what can you see out your window today?
Love this question. So we're lucky enough, we live on the Fleurieu Peninsula. We've got a couple acres, so I can look out, I can see vines and the hills in the background, and it's a beautiful day here in Adelaide. There's no wind and blue skies. Yeah, great day.
Beautiful. So now you've just mentioned that you are in Adelaide. So tell me a little bit about how you got into interior design, your studio, and what is the design scene like in South Australia?
Wow. Okay, where to start? So I started Little Road in 2015, more as a bit of a side hustle. I used to be a paramedic. That was my main profession. I've done that since I was 21. So I did that for 16 years. Yeah. Unfortunately, I reached a point, mental health caught up with me. So I needed to leave that. A few years prior to that, my wife had been on to me to, you need to do something. She was conscious I didn't have a pastime. I wasn't doing too much other than just going to work. And she said, "You've always loved architecture and interiors. Why don't you just do some study?" Yep. So I did a diploma, loved it. I did that over a couple of years, really resonated with me. And I kind of just sat there.
While you were still working as a paramedic, you were studying?
Yeah.
Wow. Yep. What a complete and utter juxtaposition. Like that is I hear a lot of people with second career. I don't think I've met paramedic to interior designer before.
Me neither. It is a great sort of conversation starter about, oh wow,
absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
There you go. Very different, but there are lots of amazing things that I've taken from that career and brought into life as an interior designer. And you've spoken about this numerous times on your podcast before about those transferable skills, which I love. But it's only sort of recently, maybe this last 6 to 12 months, that I've really realized that how powerful that is.
Yeah.
So I love that.
The one that comes to mind is being able to make decisions under pressure. If there isn't being a paramedic, if that's not the biggest training ground for that kind of decision making, that and some clients might think it's a life and death decision, the things you've got to solve, but yes, on a building site or just that kind of stuff, that is just such an amazing transferable skill.
Absolutely. So yeah, problem solving, thinking on your feet, managing stressful situations. Yes, we are talking about first world problems, not situations. But probably the main one is communication and adapting that to different personalities. As you know, our clients can be very different backgrounds, professions, expectations. So being able to be adaptable in that sense has been, a great thing. And communication is probably one of my core values. So I love it, and it's so important for success.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. And so tell me, how big is your studio? So you're nearly at the 10-year mark, which is such an achievement. I think any business that lasts like a year or however long, but 10 years is a real kind of milestone. So congratulations.
Thank you. It's gone very quickly. A lot of it is a bit of a blur, but I have a team of 5 now. So my business probably in 2019 grew quite rapidly. It was just me for a fair chunk of that. And then I slowly took on my first interior designer, then another, then I got a studio manager. And now, team of 5, hugely grateful because I couldn't do it without them.
Yeah.
They're a huge part of our success and the reason we can, do a whole variety of different projects.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so many questions there. So tell me a little bit about that decision around hiring a studio manager, because that's always such a big leap for someone to realize that actually they need more than just kind of interior designers. Like that, I think, is a real point in a business where you kind of, it's a real growth kind of milestone. How did you realize that that was going to be your next hire?
Well, it was more, so a bit of background. When I sort of got more serious into interior design, I actually had a retail concept store. I love retail. It's always a passion of mine. I had a store, and Jason, who's my design studio manager, he managed that store.
Yep.
And after a couple of years, I decided to close that. We got too busy. So I just needed to, narrow the focus. And he was someone just with these amazing skills and wealth of experience that I just didn't want to lose.
Yep.
So he was just the ideal person to slot into that role. Because of his background and his experience, and he has just transformed how we do things. And it's so lovely to have, if I have to step away or on leave, he steps in. He's great with HR, great with systems and processes, super professional. He does all our discovery calls. He's just a brilliant communicator, which he's slotted in perfectly.
So next question. So that's a really interesting thing you've just said about how he does your discovery calls, because so often that is something that studio owners struggle to hand over because they feel like that's their kind of, like someone's coming to them. And if they don't get them, then how is that perceived? And how did you become comfortable with handing that over to him?
It was a bit of a no-brainer, really. Like we've got a template. He's memorized that now, and he's such a great conversationalist. It just evolves, and he gets all this amazing information out of people that I just can't do.
Yeah.
But also, as a creative, as you would know, you kind of get distracted. So someone might mention, this renovation, and I like this style, and then you go off on a tangent. And you haven't got the key information. So he's really good at getting that vital information, asking some of those hard questions straight up about budget, expectations, timelines. So he really sort of sets the standard from the start, which I love, because I love when people can call or they email and they get Jason, and it's super professional right from the start.
Yeah, awesome. And that just really highlights another kind of thing. When it comes to hiring people, usually the best person you can hire is someone who is very good at the stuff that you are not good at.
Absolutely.
So often I see interior designers or studio owners, when they're growing their business, they just hire another version of them. And so then you've got 2 people who love doing a certain thing, but then the tasks that they don't like don't get done. So I think, that's such a key thing to when you're hiring people.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what's going on in South Australia and Adelaide at the moment in design, and what kind of projects are you working on?
It's pretty exciting what's happening in Adelaide. It's grown so much, probably since post-COVID.
Yep.
We didn't really have the lockdowns and shutdowns like the eastern states had, but during that time, lots of places were thinking about, what's next? This is a great opportunity to do some development. So, there's amazing hotels now. The visitation to Adelaide has grown so much. So there's an expectation now to have, all sorts of offerings for accommodation, food and beverage. We're kind of known as the festival state.
Yeah.
We're coming into, it's called the Adelaide 500. It's in November, so there'll be a massive influx from all over the world. And then we move into 2025, and there'll be the Adelaide Fringe, Adelaide Festival. So we're really attracting great national and international visitors. So there is an expectation. So we need to step up, which Adelaide has been doing for the last couple of years, and it's exciting.
Yeah. And is a lot of your work just in South Australia, or do you work in other states as well?
So majority of our work is in South Australia. We've got a couple of projects in Victoria at the moment, which is exciting. Working on a bar and restaurant and a residential project. But most of our work is in South Australia.
Yeah, wow. So cool. So cool.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned it a couple of times, and obviously this just makes my heart sing, but you have talked about systems and processes, and with a team of 5 and with a studio manager and working interstate, like there are lots of moving parts there. What are some of the things you've put in place when it comes to systems and processes that you feel have really kind of just make everything work in the business better?
So I think it's, as you know, it's never perfect. It's always evolving. As a creative, I always want to change something. But I think we just started with even just documenting what it is that I do each day. And we started this a few years ago. And then what does Amy do? What does Jason do? What does Emma do? And then from that, we sort of created some procedures or some policies around that, and just little things like annual leave, sick leave, how to answer the phone. And these aren't things to micromanage people. It's just so that things are consistent. And then if someone has a question, we can go, well, have you read X, Y, and Z first? If you don't understand it, then come and ask me, or ask Jason, or ask another member of the team. But it's amazing when you can just get that information out of your head and onto a bit of paper, and just starting, and it just evolves. And it's always, as I said earlier, it's always changing. But even things like just having a client management system, we use Trello to track most of our projects, just automating some of those processes, just to really set the mark and sort of meet those expectations that a lot of clients do have. And then for me, it's all about just it being professional, it being consistent. I think that's a really important thing, is to be consistent and to meet expectations.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. So good. So I want to come back a little bit to your kind of life as a paramedic and then how you moved into interior design, because one of the other things that I think is really interesting there is it's also not natural. It's not the most natural thing then to come into business ownership or go into like owning your own studio. Was that like that desire to kind of work for yourself, was that always something that you had in the back of your mind, or did you kind of fall into it?
Yes and no. So both my parents had businesses, so I always observed them and the hard work that they did. So maybe that was a bit of a, I don't really want to do that because, there is no life. My dad was a farmer, so, you can't switch off from that. My mum had her own business. She wasn't home a great deal, but they did that to provide. So there's pros and cons to that. When I finished my study, I actually reached out to, those that I held in high regard in the industry and certainly still do. But I couldn't get an opportunity. And I don't know whether it was because I was male, I wasn't, straight. I hadn't done a university degree. Maybe that was a problem.
I find that really interesting because it's something that I hear an awful lot. So as an industry, such a large proportion of people come to it as a second or third career, which means that they're going to be older when they come out of their training. But then they really, really struggle to then get that first job because
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. It's the perception of age, or that they're going to be harder to work with or mentor or whatever it is, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
often people then end up starting their own business because that's the only way they can actually work in the industry. And I think that's so sad, because just like you talk about transferable skills as a benefit to you as a studio owner, I just think as an employee that gives you so many, I just think it's such a wasted opportunity that people don't take on board. So it's interesting. It's such a common thing that I hear people experience. I'm like, I don't know why we do that.
I don't know either. And it's interesting, when I just kept getting knocked back, I'm like, I'm just happy to come and make the coffee.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, it's like when you're younger and you're like a sponge, you just want to be immersed in this really exciting industry that we are so lucky to work in. But I just couldn't cut it or get that opportunity. So started my own business, and here we are today. But it's interesting whenever we have an opening, and I look at resumes. I am really drawn to those that have some really interesting background. It might have been they worked at McDonald's or anything customer service where they really have to work hard. I mean, for me, that's like amazing work ethic. If they've been in some sort of customer service job, they've had to communicate with people. And that's such a vital part of our role as interior designers, is to communicate and get information out of people. Yeah. So, I find it quite fascinating. And it is quite sad that our industry, in the past has been like that. Hopefully it's changing.
I don't know if it is, but I hope that it does, because I do think it is a real missed opportunity. And then I think the kind of the follow on to that, which I think is really sad. So like when people then are almost not forced, but they go, okay, well then I'll start my own business. They then struggle because they don't have the business knowledge. So you mentioned before that both your parents have run their own business. Did you do kind of business training, or did you learn all of that on the job, or did you kind of make it up for a while and just see how it worked?
Yeah, I mean, I've done some further studying. I've done some courses that kind of delves into some of those areas, but I certainly haven't done an accountancy degree or economics or an MBA. That would all be amazing and super helpful, but I've kind of just had to learn as I go. I've had some amazing support by some mentors and coaches, which has been amazing. But I mean, education, whether it's a diploma or a university degree, that's not setting you up to have your own small business. No. It's teaching you, the creative side of it, but not the business side.
Yeah. And did you know early on that you were going to need help with the business side, or is it something that you kind of like, oh, I'll be okay, and then it kind of became more apparent as you went along?
No, I think I did learn early on, and I got some great advice from, I've had many mentors over the years, some great advice that, outsource whenever possible. Yeah. If you don't have that skill and it feels overwhelming to delve in and learn it, then outsource. Yeah. If you can. I mean, that's not always an option, and it certainly wasn't for me when I first started. Like it costs money. Yeah. So sometimes you can't do that. You have to wait. But accountancy and bookkeeping, that's a classic example of when you should outsource. Yeah. As soon as you can, because that stuff will come to bite you. And that certainly came to bite me in the early days. Like, what's BAS? I don't know what that is. I should save for that, really. Yeah. And I'm still learning. It's not perfect.
And I think that's so, there are so many resources now. I mean, even I can imagine compared to when you started 10 years ago, the amount of resources, like free resources there are out there now, I think of Justine McLean from the Flossy Files, who does so much great kind of financial literacy, business financial literacy out there. And there's so many people out there that are doing that. I think that is so so helpful. So even if you can't afford to outsource, which, let's be honest, most people can't at the start of their business. The other one that comes to mind is Tracy from TL Legal. Like, she, from the legal perspective, like, that's just really, like, that stuff is the stuff that you really do need to outsource. You need to get right, but it's expensive. So I think kind of latching on to as much information as you can until you can outsource it is so good.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that I always think is so interesting when it comes to how people run their businesses is when something goes wrong, how they kind of deal with it. What is something that comes to mind that's gone wrong for you that has made you really question how you, like, one of the processes that you do in the studio or something, or how you run the studio? Like, is there something that comes to mind that you kind of like, oh, really learned a big lesson from that one?
Yeah, and it probably was, 5+ years ago, was that conversation around budget with a client. And I think on your most recent podcast that I listened to the other day, you speak about this. And having those upfront conversations, because it leads to disappointment.
Sure does.
And added stress to a client when you don't have those real conversations about what's essentially about making sure expectations align. So what is your budget? What are you willing to invest? And clients, as we know, are always a little bit reluctant to have that conversation. I always go, well, I'm not asking because I take a percentage of that budget. It's asking to make sure that this project is realistic, because we don't want to have that disappointment. We want we are here to realize your project. We want to be on the same page. So if you're saying that you want to renovate a bathroom and you only have $10,000, I, as a professional, need to provide some education and say it's just not achievable because of X, Y, and Z. So I think that budget conversation is something that I learned fairly early on, to make sure that expectations align. Because, if you've built or renovated before, which I have back in the day, it's a horrible experience. You see this beautiful design and then it gets priced by the builder and you can't afford it. So,
and it's, I think that's such a big lesson that designers need, or studio owners need to learn, because, like, there's so many parts to it. One, you got to get comfortable talking about money. And you also have to educate the client that I'm not asking this question because my fees are linked to it. Like, that is totally separate. But in a way, it also is part of it, because it's like, if they don't have a big enough budget to do the work and cover your fees, then something's got to give. And normally it's our fees. So then that's another part of the question. And then I think as well, there is nothing worse than having this client fall in love with this beautiful design, and it goes out to to the builders, and then it's like, we can't afford any of it, or we can only do half of it, or we have to slash and burn. And you can always kind of, I just think, there's so much consideration and thought that goes into a concept or a design. When you kind of have to start pulling pieces off, it's like, oh, we'll just pull, like, it's like an outfit. Oh, we'll just pull some buttons off, and we'll just pull, and it's just never quite the same. Where if you had a real understanding of their budget from the start, the completed design would actually still be really beautiful. And I think so often we struggle to educate the client around what the implications of the budget are. And also, it's a real opportunity for us as designers to show the value we can bring, because you can go, okay, that's not like that, most probably is a little bit on the small side for the budget, for the amount of works you want to do. However, we can do this, we can do that. It's a real kind of opportunity for you to show, this is why you need to work with me.
Exactly.
But so I think that's just it's a big thing we need to get better at, I think.
Yeah. I mean, and we work with a number of builders in commercial and residential, and they all price differently, as you know. So I think the question when clients ask of myself is, how much is this going to cost? obviously I can't give them an exact figure because I don't know who they're going to be working with and where they're situated and the type of finishes and expectations that they have. But what I do is go, well, to speak about a previous project of this size, maybe it's a kitchen of this size, these finishes, these appliances, it cost 100,000.
Yeah.
But that's just a guide. How does that sit with you?
Yeah.
And just sort of gauging their sense of that. And then, but we can do that for 70,000, but we need to make some sacrifices.
Mm.
So I think that's, as you've touched on, is that education. But providing a guide, I think, is super helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, that conversation about money is so important for the success of a project.
Yeah. And I think so many designers shy away from it because they're just uncomfortable with the whole thing. And it's like, what you're doing is really just putting off an uncomfortable conversation because you're going to you'll end up having it at the end when it all comes back way more than what they want to spend.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what is exciting you about our industry at the moment?
Oh, so much. I think, it's an amazing time to have an interior design business and be an interior designer because of the abundance of materials and finishes that are available to us. I mean, I'm sure you're the same. Your inbox will be flooded daily with what's new. Yep. So it's quite exciting, which is great for the client, I think, as well. And it also just keeps suppliers on their feet, having to change and adapt and look at their pricing to remain competitive. So I think that's super exciting. I am loving people's willingness to use more color in their interiors. I think that's super exciting. And that wasn't always sort of what I was drawn to.
Yep.
But there's nothing better than color.
Yeah.
It's pretty exciting. Even if it's just paint. That's, I say to clients, let's just start with the paint and let's paint the ceiling as well. And they're like, oh. And I'm like,
step too far there, Marcus.
I know. But I'm like, at the end of the day, it is paint and we can paint over it.
Yeah.
So, I'm excited that people are more willing to take more risks. I mean, it's not for everyone, obviously. There's some clients that just love their whites and their greys, and that's great. That's what they want, but also just, the willingness to trust us and work with us to, use some color or some different textures is super exciting.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I'm loving color at the moment as well. I'm actually really loving almost like it's this kind of, I don't know, it's just this saturation of color and it's so much fun and it's not necessarily bright or I'm just loving it at the moment. I think, color is just beautiful. And what are you looking forward to in your business in the next 12 months?
Oh, so much. There's, we had some really exciting hospitality projects that were on the cards and they sort of got pulled because of just, the costs associated. So I'm hoping that one of those will kick off in the new year again, but on a much smaller scale. So it's just assisting clients in that commercial hospitality space, which is very different from residential, but just assisting them with what's possible, how we can pull things back, how we can, keep that similar concept, but we do it on a smaller scale. So I'm looking forward to hopefully one or two of those happening. We've got some great residential projects that we're in the design phase for, so they'll be hopefully mid next year in construction. Working with a lovely young couple in a sort of a Spanish sort of villa, which is a little bit different.
Wow,
so
that's very cool.
That's super cool. Some lovely sort of European influences there. So that's exciting, but also what's exciting about that is getting to work with great people who really want to collaborate and sort of form a great team. So we've been brought on very early, working with building designer, the builder straight up. So they're really trying to form a great team from the start so that this can be successful. Yeah.
So, okay, question on that. Did they have they done this before and knew that it was really important to have this core team from the start, or have they because a lot of clients don't understand that. And it's, usually everyone's brought on about 6 months too late kind of thing.
Yeah, well, they've renovated, but they haven't built from new before. So they knew straight up that they're out of their depth. They have a very successful hospitality business, so they're also very busy. So they are also they realize when they need to outsource. So, which is super refreshing. That's obviously not every client is able to do that. But I just love being involved from the start, because you can really get amongst the concepts, make sure that there's adequate storage and all those small things that are often missed in that early design phase by an architect or a building designer. Yeah. So, yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting. It's always lovely when you get to work on a project like that. I've been very fortunate to do that a couple of times, and you kind of go, oh, why can't they all be like this?
I know. But for me, it's about, we are very lucky, getting to work with amazing people, because I very much like to work in a collaborative way. Yeah. So I think teamwork is dream work. And if you can have, great relationships with tradespeople and builders and your clients, and other professionals or consultants, I think that's where the magic is.
Oh, for sure. Oh, Marcus, I really love talking to you. It's so interesting. As I said, I've never met a paramedic who's gone to an interior designer before, so you're my first. It's awesome. And it's lovely to hear about everything that's happening over in Adelaide. So thank you.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to this design dialogue. I hope you have found it full of inspiration and helpful information to take into your design studio. If you like the podcast and want to hear more, consider sharing it or writing a review, as it helps us reach more people, and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to unlock the power of effortless studio management and elevate your design business to new heights, please follow the links in our show notes to see how more time to design can help you build a better business. Have a great week, and I will see you for our next Design Dialogue.